The keys scraped against metal like fingernails on a chalkboard. Wrong lock. I stood there at 11:47 p.m., exhausted from a red-eye flight from Denver, my toolbox weighing down my left shoulder, staring at a shiny new deadbolt that definitely wasn't there when I left for the electrical job 3 days ago. Through the living room window, I could see my wife Natalie on my couch, laughing at something on my TV, drinking what looked like my good whiskey from my crystal glasses. She wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize sat beside her, his arm draped over her shoulders like he owned the place. My phone buzzed. Text message from Natalie. Found someone better. Collect your things next week. I read it twice. Then I photographed the new deadbolt with my phone's camera, the flash reflecting off the brass surface. The metal was so new it still had the manufacturer's sticker partially peeled off. Sloppy work. She'd always been impatient with details. I typed back, "Are you sure about that?" 3 dots appeared on my screen, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. I pocketed my phone, walked to my truck, and drove to the Marriott downtown. The night clerk looked half asleep as I checked in, paying cash for a room overlooking the river. I ordered room service, a steak dinner that cost more than Natalie usually spent on groceries in a week. Might as well start somewhere. While I waited for the food, I sat on the hotel bed and really looked at that photograph of the deadbolt. She'd hired someone to install it, probably paid extra for after-hours service. That showed planning. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision born from guilt or panic. This was calculated. The thing about being married to someone for 22 years is that you think you know them. Natalie married a quiet electrician, union guy with steady work and a reliable paycheck. What she'd apparently forgotten over the years was that I wasn't just any electrician. I owned Kramer Electrical Solutions, licensed in 4 states, with commercial contracts that kept crews busy year-round. I'd built our house with my own hands, every wire and outlet installed to code and then some. My name was on everything that mattered. The room service arrived as I was scrolling through my phone, looking at the contact information for my attorney, Jim Patterson. We'd gone to high school together, played football until I blew out my knee junior year. He'd handled the paperwork when I incorporated the business, when I bought the land, when I set up the family trust that held the house title. The steak was perfect. Medium rare, just like I had ordered. I ate slowly, thinking about that new deadbolt and the man on my couch. Natalie had upgraded to someone better, according to her text. I wondered what her definition of better looked like these days. I spent Tuesday morning doing research. Amazing what you can find out about someone with just a name and a little patience. The man from my couch was Trevor Donnelly, 38 years old, regional sales manager for a medical supply company. His LinkedIn profile showed him standing next to a silver BMW, arms crossed, wearing a smile that probably worked great on lonely housewives. Trevor lived in the Riverside luxury apartments, the kind of place that advertised executive living, but was really just overpriced one-bedrooms with granite countertops. His lease was public record, $2,800 a month for 900 square feet. The BMW wasn't leased like I'd initially assumed. It was financed, and according to the credit report I could access through my business accounts, he was 3 payments behind. Natalie had upgraded to a man who owned nothing and was drowning in debt. She was living in a house that, legally speaking, she had no claim to. I called Jim Patterson at 9 a.m. sharp. "Ben, good to hear from you. How's the electrical business?" "Complicated. I need to ask you about that prenup Natalie signed before we got married." A pause. "That was over 20 years ago." "What's going on?" I told him about the locks, the text message, Trevor on my couch. Jim listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always liked about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Ben, that prenup is ironclad. We wrote it specifically to protect the family trust. The house, the land, the business assets. None of that is marital property. If Natalie has abandoned the residence and is cohabiting with another party, she's technically in violation of the occupancy clause. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you can legally reclaim your property. But Ben, you need to be smart about this. Document everything. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation." "What about the utilities?" Another pause. "The accounts are in your name? Everything. Power, water, gas, internet, security system. I set it all up when I built the house. Then legally, you have every right to manage those accounts as you see fit. But again, document everything. If this goes to court, you want to show that you followed proper procedures." I hung up and sat in my truck outside the coffee shop where I'd made the call. Through the window, I could see the morning crowd. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, office workers checking their phones, retirees reading newspapers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that my world had shifted overnight. My phone rang. Natalie. Ben, we need to talk. I'm listening. This doesn't have to be ugly. We can handle this like adults. You changed the locks on my house and moved another man into my bed. How exactly did you picture this conversation going? It's not like that. Trevor and I, we just connected. You've been working so much, we barely talk anymore. I felt lonely. So you decided to cure your loneliness by stealing my house. It's not stealing. I live here too. Actually, you don't. Check the deed, Natalie. Check the prenup you signed at that brunch place on Elm Street. The one where you said the mimosas made everything look blurry. Silence. I'll be by this afternoon to collect some of my things, I said. Make sure you and Trevor are decent. I hung up before she could respond. Wednesday morning, I called the power company. Kramer Electrical Solutions, this is Ben Kramer. I need to report an unauthorized occupant at 1247 Oakwood Drive. The customer service representative sounded bored. What kind of unauthorized occupant? Someone has changed the locks and is living in my house without permission. I'm the account holder and property owner. I need the service disconnected immediately. I'll need to verify your identity and account information. I rattled off my social security number, the account number I'd memorized years ago, and the service address. Everything matched their records perfectly. Mr. Kramer, I show that account is current. Are you sure you want to disconnect service? Absolutely. The unauthorized occupants can establish their own account if they want power. I can have a technician out there this afternoon. Make it happen. Next call, water department. Same conversation, same result. Then gas company, internet provider, even the security monitoring service that watched the cameras I'd installed around the property. By 2 p.m., 1247 Oakwood Drive was going to be a very dark, very cold place to conduct an affair. I drove by the house at 3:30, just as the power company truck was pulling away. Through the windows, I could see Natalie and Trevor moving around with flashlights. My phone started ringing at 4:15. Natalie again. Ben, this is insane. You can't just cut off the utilities. I can do whatever I want with my accounts at my house. The food in the refrigerator is spoiling. The security system is down. It's going to be 30 degrees tonight. Maybe Trevor can help you figure something out. He seems like a resourceful guy. This is harassment. No, this is property management. If you want utilities, you're welcome to set up accounts in your name. Of course, you'll need permission from the property owner. I'm calling the police. Good idea. Ask them to explain property law while they're there. She hung up. I ordered Chinese takeout and ate it in my hotel room while watching the news. The weather forecast called for snow flurries overnight. I hope Trevor had a warm car. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Sophie. She was a sophomore at State, majoring in communications and minoring in social media drama. Dad, what's going on? Mom says you locked her out of the house? I called her back. Sophie answered on the first ring. Dad, Mom is freaking out. She says you're being vindictive and cruel. Sophie, your mother changed the locks on my house and moved another man into our bedroom. How exactly am I the villain in this story? She said you two have been having problems for months. News to me. When did she mention these problems to you? A pause. She didn't exactly. But she said you've been distant and working all the time. I've been working the same amount I've worked for the past 20 years. The amount that paid for your college tuition and your car and that spring break trip to Cancun. This is so messed up. Are you guys getting divorced? That appears to be your mother's plan. She just chose an interesting way to start the process. Where are you staying? Hotel downtown. Don't worry about me, kiddo. I'm fine. What about Mom? Your mother's a 44-year-old lawyer. I'm sure she'll figure something out. After I hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and really thought about what came next. Natalie had made her choice. She'd planned this carefully, probably for weeks or months. The new deadbolt, the timing while I was out of town, the dramatic text message, all of it designed for maximum impact. What she hadn't planned for was the aftermath. Thursday morning brought 6 inches of snow and 47 missed calls from Natalie. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Instead, I drove to Jim Patterson's office and sat down with the paperwork that would make everything official. You're sure about this? Jim asked, sliding the eviction notice across his desk. She abandoned the property, Jim. Changed the locks, moved in an unauthorized occupant, sent me a text message declaring her intention to end the marriage. Under the terms of the prenup, she has forfeited any claim to occupancy. The law is on your side, but this is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just making it legal. The sheriff's deputy who served the notice was a guy named Rodriguez. I'd done some electrical work for the previous year. He recognized me when I met him at the house. This is awkward, Ben. I heard about what happened. Small town, word travels fast. You want me to wait while you get some of your things? I'm not going in there. Everything I need is at the hotel. Rodriguez knocked on the door. Natalie answered wearing one of my old flannel shirts over jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked like she hadn't slept much. Trevor was nowhere to be seen. Mrs. Kramer, I'm Deputy Rodriguez. I have an eviction notice for this address. This is my house. You can't evict me from my own house. Ma'am, according to the property records and the legal documents I've been provided, you have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Natalie took the papers with shaking hands. Her eyes found me standing by my truck, and for a moment I saw something I'd never seen before in 22 years of marriage. Genuine fear. Ben, please, we can work this out. You had a chance to work it out before you changed my locks. I made a mistake. Trevor's gone. He left yesterday when the power went out. Smart man. Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go. You have your mother's house. According to the prenup, that's been your legal address all along. Rodriguez handed her a copy of the notice. Ma'am, you need to understand that this is a legal document. If you're not out by Sunday at 6 p.m., I'll be back with a removal order. After Rodriguez left, Natalie walked over to my truck. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the oversized flannel shirt and the reality of what was happening. 22 years, Ben? Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me. Past tense. I never meant for it to happen like this. How did you mean for it to happen? You changed the locks while I was working. You moved another man into our bedroom. You sent me a text message ending our marriage. How exactly was this supposed to go? I thought you'd fight for me. I thought you'd be worth fighting for. She started crying then, standing in the snow in my driveway, holding an eviction notice that made everything real. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her we could fix this somehow, but that part was getting smaller every day. What am I supposed to tell people? Tell them the truth. Tell them you chose to leave. I drove away while she was still standing there in the snow. Saturday morning, I hired a moving company. Professional outfit, 3 guys with a truck, fully insured and bonded. I met them at the house at 8 a.m. with a detailed inventory of everything that belonged to Natalie. We're only moving items on this list, I told the crew chief, a guy named Martinez who looked like he'd been moving furniture since before I was born. Everything else stays exactly where it is. Natalie's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. This would be easier without a confrontation. The front door was still locked, but I had keys to my own house. The new deadbolt was the only thing that had changed, and it took me about 30 seconds to remove it with my drill. I left it on the kitchen counter with a note. Thanks for the upgrade, Ben. The movers worked efficiently, boxing up Natalie's clothes, her books, her collection of ceramic angels that I'd never understood, her jewelry box from the bedroom dresser, the framed photos of her family from the hallway, 22 years of accumulated possessions that somehow looked smaller when packed into cardboard boxes. I kept my wedding ring on while I supervised the move. Seemed important somehow, like taking it off would make this about revenge instead of justice. We were loading the last boxes when Natalie's Honda pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly, like she was walking to her own execution. Ben, what are you doing? Moving your belongings to your legal address. You can't do this. Actually, I can. You abandoned the property. Under state law, I have the right to remove abandoned possessions. She walked over to Martinez, who was securing the load with tie-down straps. This is theft. You're stealing my things. Martinez looked at me. Sir, do you have documentation? I handed him copies of the eviction notice, the property deed, and the prenup. He glanced through them and handed them back. Ma'am, everything looks legal to me. We're just doing our job. Natalie's face went red. She picked up one of the ceramic angels from a box that hadn't been loaded yet and threw it at my truck. It shattered against the driver's side window, leaving a spider web of cracks in the safety glass. Feel better? I asked. Go to heck, Ben. Already there. You sent me the address. Martinez and his crew finished loading while Natalie sat in her car, crying or making phone calls or both. I followed the moving truck to her mother's house on Maple Street, a small ranch-style place with a yard full of garden gnomes and plastic flamingos. Mrs. Patterson, Natalie's mother, had kept her maiden name. came out to watch us unload. She was 73 years old and had never liked me much. The feeling was mutual. Benjamin, this is a new low even for you. Hello, Eleanor. Nice to see you too. Throwing my daughter out of her own home like common trash. Your daughter threw herself out when she changed the locks and moved in her boyfriend. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. Some mistakes have consequences. The movers stacked Natalie's boxes in Eleanor's garage. 22 years of marriage reduced to a pile of cardboard that barely filled half the space. When they finished, I tipped each of them $50 and watched the truck drive away. Natalie got out of her car and walked over to where I was standing. I filed assault charges, I said quietly. What? The ceramic angel. That's destruction of property and assault with a deadly tool. I have 3 witnesses and a damaged truck. You're insane. I'm thorough. There's a difference. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving her standing in her mother's driveway surrounded by boxes and the wreckage of the life she'd thrown away. Monday morning brought a phone call that made everything even more interesting. Trevor Donnelly's employer, Med Supply Solutions, had received an anonymous tip about irregularities in his expense reports. I knew this because Trevor called me. Kramer, what did you do? I'm sorry, who is this? You know perfectly well who this is. What did you tell my boss? I haven't spoken to your boss. I don't even know who your boss is. Bees. Someone sent them copies of my expense reports with client visit dates that don't match my GPS records. Sounds like a problem you should discuss with HR. This is harassment. No, this is Tuesday. Harassment would be me calling you every hour to discuss what you did to my marriage. Your marriage was over before I came along. Was it? Because my wife seemed pretty committed when she was planning our anniversary trip to Hawaii. That was 2 weeks before you showed up. Trevor was quiet for a moment. Look, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. How did you mean for it to happen? I don't know. I thought maybe you guys were separated or something. Did you ask? Not exactly. So you just assumed it was okay to sleep with a married woman in her husband's house? It's complicated. No, it's not. It's simple. You're a predator who targets married women, and you got caught. I hung up before he could respond. The truth was, I hadn't sent anything to Trevor's employer, but I had done some research, and what I'd found was interesting. Trevor had a pattern of dating women who were financially stable. His last 3 relationships, according to social media and public records, had all been with women who owned property or had substantial assets. He was a professional boyfriend, basically. A parasite, who found women with resources and convinced them to share. What I'd also found was that Trevor's expense reports were genuinely problematic. He'd been claiming client visits in cities he'd never been to, padding his mileage, and billing for meals that happened on weekends when he was supposed to be seeing clients. Someone at Med Supply had eventually noticed the discrepancies and started an investigation. I hadn't caused Trevor's problems. I'd just been curious enough to discover them. My phone rang again. Natalie this time. Ben, I need to ask you something. I'm listening. Did you have anything to do with Trevor losing his job? Trevor lost his job? Don't play dumb. His boss fired him this morning. Something about falsified expense reports. Sounds like Trevor has been busy. He says someone sent his company information about his personal life. His personal life or his professional misconduct? A pause. What do you mean? I mean, Trevor has been stealing from his employer for months, maybe years. If someone finally noticed, that's not harassment. That's justice. You did this. I didn't do anything. I didn't have to. Trevor did it to himself. He's broke, Ben. The BMW got repossessed yesterday. He can't make his rent. Sounds like your boyfriend isn't as successful as he pretended to be. He's not my boyfriend anymore. Smart move. I need to come home. You don't have a home. You abandoned it, remember? I made a mistake. You made a choice. Now you get to live with it. She hung up, and I sat in my hotel room thinking about choices and consequences. Natalie had chosen excitement over stability. Trevor had chosen theft over honest work. They'd both chosen deception over truth. I'd chosen to stop being a victim. The call came from my old friend Jack Russo on Wednesday evening. Jack owned a bar called Russo's Place, a working-class joint where construction workers and electricians went to drink beer and complain about their jobs. We'd been friends since high school, back when I still thought life was fair and marriage meant forever. Ben, you need to get down here. What's wrong? Your wife is here with some guy I don't recognize. They're drunk and loud, and she's telling everyone who'll listen that you're a controlling and aggressive husband who threw her out on the street. Let me guess. People are buying her drinks and offering sympathy. Some are. Others remember what kind of man you are. It's getting ugly. I'll be right there. Russo's place was packed for a Wednesday night, mostly with guys I'd worked with over the years. The electricians' union was tight, and word had already spread about Natalie changing the locks. Most of the men understood what that meant, even if they didn't know all the details. I found Natalie at the bar, sitting next to a man I didn't recognize. She was wearing a low-cut dress I'd never seen before, and she'd had her hair done. The transformation was remarkable, and she looked like she was trying to be 25 again. The man beside her was about my age, wearing a suit that looked expensive. He had his hand on her lower back in a way that suggested they'd moved past introductory conversation. Jack nodded toward them from behind the bar. "She's been here for 2 hours, telling everyone you're a monster." "What's she saying exactly?" "That you cut off the utilities to freeze her out. That you had her stuff thrown in the street. That you're trying to steal the house she helped pay for." "And what are people saying back?" "Mixed reactions. The guys who know you aren't buying it, but some of the younger ones, the ones who don't know the whole story, they're getting worked up." I walked over to where Natalie was sitting. She saw me coming and her face went pale. "Ben, I didn't expect to see you here." "It's my regular bar, Natalie. I've been coming here for 15 years. The man beside her turned around. He was younger than I'd thought, maybe 40, with the kind of confidence that came from never having his face punched. "You must be the husband," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Mitchell." I didn't shake his hand. "And you are?" "Friend of Natalie's. She's been telling me about her situation." "Her situation? How you've been harassing her, cutting off utilities, having her evicted from her own home." "It's not her home. It's my home. She changed the locks and moved in her boyfriend." David looked confused. "That's not what she told me." "I'm sure it's not." Natalie grabbed David's arm. "We should go." "No," I said. "Let's clear this up right now. David, right? Let me tell you what actually happened." I raised my voice so the whole bar could hear. 3 days ago, I came home from a work trip to find that my wife had changed the locks on the house I built with my own hands. When I looked through the window, she was on my couch with another man drinking my whiskey. She sent me a text message saying she'd found someone better and I should collect my things. The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was listening now. "The house is titled in my family trust. Her name isn't on the deed. She signed a prenup 22 years ago that makes this very clear. When she changed the locks and moved in her boyfriend, she legally abandoned the property." "That's not true," Natalie said, but her voice was shaky. "Which part? The part about changing the locks? The part about the boyfriend? Or the part about the prenup you signed over mimosas at that brunch place on Elm Street?" David looked at Natalie. "You didn't mention a prenup." "It's complicated," she said. "No, it's not," I continued. "She chose to leave. She chose to end our marriage. She chose to do it in the most humiliating way possible. Now she's upset because choices have consequences." One of the younger guys at a table near the pool table stood up. His name was Tommy Garrett, and he worked construction for one of my competitors. "That's still no reason to throw a woman out on the street." "I didn't throw her out on the street. I had her belongings moved to her mother's house, where she's been living quite comfortably. You cut off the utilities in winter. I canceled my accounts at my house. If she wanted utilities, she was free to establish her own accounts." "That's cold, man. You know what's cold? Coming home to find another man in your bed and a text message ending your marriage." Tommy stepped closer. "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed to find someone else." The bar went dead silent. Jack reached under the counter for the baseball bat he kept there for situations like this. "Tommy," I said quietly, "you don't know what you're talking about." "I know you're a bully picking on a woman who can't fight back. She's a lawyer, Tommy. She can fight back just fine. Maybe someone should teach you what it feels like to be pushed around." That's when David Mitchell made his mistake. He stood up and put his hand on my shoulder. "Look, maybe we should all just calm down." I looked at his hand on my shoulder, then at his face. "Take your hand off me. I'm just trying to keep the peace." "Take your hand off me." He didn't. Instead, he squeezed, like he was trying to be reassuring or controlling or both. I grabbed his wrist and twisted, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make him let go. He stumbled backward into his bar stool. "Don't touch me again." David rubbed his wrist. "You're insane. I'm tired. Tired of being lied about, tired of being blamed for other people's choices, and really tired of strangers thinking they know my story." Tommy Garrett was still standing by the pool table, looking like he wanted to be a hero. "You want to try that tough guy act on someone your own size? Tommy, sit down before you do something stupid. Make me." I looked around the bar at faces I'd known for years. Some sympathetic, some confused, some eager for a fight that would give them something to talk about for weeks. You know what, Tommy? You're right. I am a bully. I bullied the power company into disconnecting service to my own house. I bullied the sheriff into serving a legal eviction notice. I bullied a moving company into relocating abandoned property. I'm a terrible person. I pulled out my wallet and threw a 20 on the bar. Jack, that's for whatever damage happens after I leave. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Natalie. By the way, your boyfriend Trevor? The one who was so much better than me? He got fired yesterday for stealing from his company. The BMW got repossessed. He's broke and probably looking for his next victim. Thought you should know. I left them sitting there and drove back to my hotel, where I ordered room service and watched the late news. The weather forecast called for more snow over the weekend. Perfect. Friday morning, I drove to the house one last time. Not to move back in, I'd already decided I was done with that chapter of my life. I was there to collect the last few things that mattered and to make sure everything was secure before I put it on the market. The locksmith I'd called was already there, a guy named Peterson who'd done work for me on commercial jobs. He was installing new deadbolts, front and back, with keys that only I would have. You want the old locks too? He asked. Keep them. Evidence for the divorce proceedings. My lawyer Jim Patterson pulled up as Peterson was finishing. We'd scheduled this meeting to document the condition of the property and to discuss the next steps in what was going to be a very short divorce process. How are you holding up, Ben? Better than expected. You bring the papers? Everything's ready. With the prenup and the abandonment, this should be straightforward. She'll get whatever personal property she can prove she owned before the marriage, plus half of any joint accounts. How much is that? About $1,200 in checking, maybe $3,000 in the savings account we missed when you closed the others. She can have it. We walked through the house together, Jim taking photos and notes for his files. The place looked different somehow, smaller, maybe like it had been holding its breath for 22 years and was finally exhaling. In the bedroom, I packed the last of my clothes and the few personal items I'd left behind. My father's watch from the nightstand, a photo of Sophie from her high school graduation. The small wooden box where I kept my grandfather's war medals. You really gonna sell it? Jim asked. Can't live here anymore. Too many ghosts. It's a beautiful house. You did good work. I did good work on a lot of things. Doesn't mean they were built to last. We were loading my truck when Natalie's Honda pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly like she was approaching a crime scene. Ben, I heard you were here. Just collecting the last of my things. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Please, 5 minutes. Jim looked at me. I'll wait in my car. After he left, Natalie and I stood in the driveway of the house we'd shared for 2 decades. She looked older somehow, worn down by the events of the past week. I want to come home. This isn't your home anymore. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. No, we can't. Ben, please, 22 years, that has to count for something. It counted for everything, until you decided it counted for nothing. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. You changed the locks. You moved in another man. You sent me a text message like I was some guy you'd been dating for a few weeks. I was confused. I felt trapped. I thought you didn't love me anymore. When did I ever give you that impression? You worked all the time. We never talked. We were like strangers living in the same house. I worked to pay for this house, to pay for Sophie's college, to pay for the life you said you wanted. I wanted a husband, not a paycheck. You had a husband. You threw him away. She started crying then, the same tears I'd seen in the driveway a few days earlier. But they didn't move me the way they once would have. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? What about consequences? What about self-respect? I'll do anything to fix this. There's nothing to fix. It's over. Because of Trevor? He's gone. He doesn't matter. This isn't about Trevor. This is about you. This is about the choice you made to betray everything we built together. People make mistakes, Ben. Some mistakes you don't come back from. I got in my truck and started the engine. Natalie knocked on the passenger window. Where are you going to live? I'll figure it out. What about us? There is no us. I backed out of the driveway and drove away, leaving her standing in front of the house she'd lost when she decided I wasn't good enough anymore. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in February, exactly 6 weeks after I'd come home to find my key wouldn't fit the lock. Judge Morrison, a woman I'd met at various community events over the years, reviewed the prenup and the abandonment documentation with the kind of thoroughness that made it clear she'd seen this scenario before. Mrs. Kramer, Did you understand the terms of this prenuptial agreement when you signed it? Natalie, sitting next to a lawyer she'd hired with money borrowed from her mother, looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. I thought it was just a formality. We were in love. I didn't think it would ever matter. But you did read it before signing? Not carefully. The document clearly states that in the event of abandonment of the marital residence, the spouse who abandons forfeits any claim to the property. Do you dispute that you changed the locks and prevented your husband from entering his own home? I was confused. I made a mistake that resulted in your husband being unable to access his own property for several days. Natalie's lawyer, a young guy who looked like he'd graduated law school the previous week, tried to argue that the prenup was unconscionable and should be set aside. Judge Morrison wasn't impressed. Counselor, your client is an attorney herself. She's been practicing law for 15 years. The idea that she didn't understand a simple prenuptial agreement strains credibility. The hearing lasted less than an hour. When it was over, I was single again, with full ownership of the house, the business, and everything else I'd accumulated over 22 years of marriage. Natalie got her personal belongings, half of the joint checking account, and the assault charge I'd filed for throwing the ceramic angel at my truck. Outside the courthouse, she tried one last time. Ben, I know you hate me now, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I really am. I don't hate you, Natalie. I don't feel anything about you at all. That's worse than hate. That's the point. She walked away toward her mother's car, where Eleanor was waiting with the engine running. I watched them drive off, then went to lunch at a diner downtown where nobody knew me and nobody cared about my story. The house sold 3 weeks later to a young couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever. They loved the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, the way every outlet and switch had been placed exactly where it made sense. I sold it to them for exactly what I'd invested in materials and labor over the years, which was about $40,000 less than market value. You sure about the price? The realtor asked. You could get more. I'm sure. The new owners were thrilled. They had no idea they were buying a house where a marriage had died, where a trust had been shattered, where a woman had chosen excitement over stability and lost everything that mattered. I used the money from the sale to buy a small condo near the lake, a place with clean lines and no history. Sophie helped me move in, bringing pizza and beer and the kind of easy conversation that reminded me why I'd worked so hard for so many years. You doing okay, Dad? Better than okay. Mom's having a hard time. I'm sure she is. She's living with Grandma Eleanor. It's not going well. Your mother made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? Forgiveness isn't the issue, kiddo. Trust is. And once that's gone, it's gone. Sophie nodded like she understood, even though at 19 she probably didn't. Not yet. But she would someday when someone she loved chose to betray her trust and she had to decide whether to be a victim or take control of her own story. What about dating? You going to start seeing other people? Maybe someday. Right now I'm just enjoying the peace and quiet. And I was. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was living exactly the life I wanted. No drama, no lies, no wondering what was really going on behind the smiles and small talk. Just me, my work, and the satisfaction of knowing that when someone tried to make me a victim, I'd chosen to be something else instead. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Trevor Donnelly at the grocery store. He was working there, stocking shelves in the produce section, wearing a name tag and a vest that was too big for him. He saw me coming and tried to duck behind a display of apples, but there wasn't anywhere to hide. Hello, Trevor. Ben, I didn't expect to see you here. I live nearby. New place by the lake. He nodded, not making eye contact. I heard you sold the house. Fresh start seemed like a good idea. Look, about what happened is over. You don't owe me an explanation. I want you to know I didn't plan it. It just happened. No, it didn't just happen. You made choices. Natalie made choices. I made choices. Now we all get to live with the consequences. Trevor looked around to make sure his supervisor wasn't watching, then leaned closer. She's not doing well. That's not my problem anymore. She lost her job. Some kind of ethics violation. Word got around about the affair, and her law firm decided she was a liability. I hadn't known that, but I wasn't surprised. Law firms were sensitive about reputation, and lawyers who made spectacles of their personal lives often found themselves looking for new careers. What about you, besides this job, I mean? I'm trying to get back on my feet. The bankruptcy is almost final. I'm living with my mom until I can save enough for a deposit on an apartment. How's that working out? About like you'd expect. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the image of him on my couch, drinking my whiskey, laughing at something on my TV while I stood in the snow trying to figure out why my key wouldn't fit my own front door. Trevor, can I give you some advice? I guess. Next time you meet a married woman, ask yourself if she's worth losing everything for. Because that's what's going to happen sooner or later. I know that now. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still blaming circumstances instead of choices. I left him there in the produce section and finished my shopping. At the checkout, the teenage cashier was chatty and friendly, asking about my weekend plans and commenting on the weather. Normal conversation with someone who didn't know my history, didn't care about my story, just treated me like a regular customer buying groceries. It felt good. That evening, Sophie called with news that didn't surprise me. Mom's moving to Phoenix. Grandma Eleanor finally kicked her out. When? Next week. She got a job with some small firm out there, mostly personal injury stuff, nothing like what she used to do. How does she seem? Bitter. She blames you for everything that happened. Of course she does. She wanted me to ask if you'd help with the moving expenses. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly typical. What did you tell her? That she should ask Trevor. Good answer. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Go ahead. Do you regret how you handled everything? The eviction, the utilities, all of it? I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your mother made choices that forced me to protect myself. But I don't regret refusing to be a victim. Some people think you were too harsh. Some people have never had their lives blown up by someone they trusted completely. Fair point. After we hung up, I sat on my deck overlooking the lake and thought about the past year. The pain, the humiliation, the anger, the satisfaction of fighting back and winning. All of it had led to this moment, this place, this life that was entirely my own. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity got the better of me. Ben, this is Natalie. I'm leaving town next week. I wanted to say goodbye and to tell you again that I'm sorry for everything. I know you probably don't care, but I needed to say it. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were over. 2 years after Natalie changed the locks, I was sitting on my new couch in my lake house, drinking good whiskey and watching the evening news. The weather forecast called for snow over the weekend, but I had nowhere to be and nothing to prove. My phone rang. Sophie calling from her apartment near campus where she was finishing her senior year. Dad, I have news. Good news or bad news? Good news. I got the internship with the engineering firm in Chicago. That's fantastic, kiddo. I'm proud of you. There's more. I'm engaged. That stopped me cold. Engaged? To who? His name is Michael. He's in my communications law class. You'll like him. When do I get to meet this Michael? Next weekend, if that works. We're driving down to visit. I'll make sure the guest room is ready. After we hung up, I sat back on my couch and smiled. Sophie was building her own life, making her own choices, learning to trust her own judgment. She'd watched her parents' marriage explode and had somehow emerged stronger and wiser. The house was quiet except for the sound of wind off the lake and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. No drama, no lies, no wondering what was really happening behind closed doors. Just peace. I raised my glass in a toast to no one in particular. To fresh starts, I said out loud, and to knowing when something is really over. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the deck and the yard and the lake with a clean white blanket that made everything look new again. I put my feet up and didn't change the locks. Didn't need to. This was my house, my life, my story, and this time, I was the only one with the keys.